up, YouTube? Thanks for swinging back by. Don't have a review today. What I've got is just a little bit of an update. Recorded a while back, I think June sometime, a video about how to create your own naturally extracted tobacco e-liquid from real tobacco leaves. Pretty simple process. You just treat the stuff basically like it's tea. You steep the stuff, let it sit in a closet, strain it out, boom, you're good to go. And at the end of the day, you end up with a mixture that looks a lot like this. My process is done, and I've ended up straining the stuff out down to a 2-micron filter, and the stuff is pretty dark. Now this is just nothing but propylene glycol and whatever natural flavorings were extracted through the process by the tobacco leaves. And I mean, you see this stuff is really dark, really thin and runny. This stuff is strong. Don't vape that straight. That'd be a much less than pleasurable experience. What you're going to want to do is mix it. I recommend either a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, or 5-to-1 ratio. Me personally, I go to a 4-to-1 ratio, which breaks down to 20% flavoring versus 80% of base. And the base that I've been using is just straight up vegetable glycerin. At 3-to-1, 3 parts base to 1 part concentrate, you get a much stronger flavor. That ends up being something like 16.5%. And at 5-to-1, you get a 25, or other way around. 3-to-1, you get a 25% concentrate, and at 5-to-1, you get about 16.5% concentrate. So it just works out in 3-to-1, 4-to-1, and 5-to-1 are just easy numbers to remember, because you can go straight by milliliters, or if you're measuring it out with a scale, you can do grams. Me personally, because I'm doing it for personal use, I just do milliliters, and I do it in a pretty easy way. I bought one of these little glue bottles online. Never been used for anything else, but it's exactly 200 milliliters. I like it because it's got the little twist top. It makes it nice and easy to pour my juice out into a smaller container for when I'm using it. And what I did is I took 40 milliliters of that stuff, and then I put 160 milliliters of base in here. I basically just filled it up to the top after I put the concentrate in. And the base that I've been using is this stuff. I picked it up at Wal-Mart because vegetable glycerin, propylene glycol, unless you end up buying the stuff in bulk, it ends up being cheaper locally than it does ordering it. And the reason being is it's a liquid, they got to ship it, and the stuff is, liquids are heavy. If I were to buy, say, a liter of vegetable glycerin, ounce for ounce, I would probably save a little bit of money over this. So for the most part, unless I just decide I'm going to make a massive batch of juice, I don't order a whole bunch of vegetable glycerin. The shipping's just, a little cost prohibitive. But if I'm going to make a big batch, then yeah, if I know I'm going to use 500 or milliliters or a liter of the stuff in one shot, yeah, I'll go ahead and order it all in once. I knew I wanted to do small batch, so I bought a small batch. You can pick this stuff at Walmart, and if I remember to, I'll put a link down below if I can find a product page on their site, rather. And this is 99.5% vegetable glycerin, and on the website, if I remember correctly, this ends up being kosher, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is, really high-grade stuff. This is about as pure as it gets. It's pharmaceutical grade. And it's $3.88 plus whatever taxes you pay in whatever state you're in. Over or across the pond in the UK, I don't know, but I'm sure your local drugstores, convenience stores, whatever, might have something to this effect. But this is the Humco brand. You might still see the older labeling that they have, because I know a few of those are floating around. It's 6 ounces, 177 milliliters, which is just about perfect for this. I ended up having just a little bit of this stuff left over, and I've got another one of these jars that I just pour the little leftovers into, and eventually I've got enough to do something with. I've been plowing through my final product, but I don't vape nicotine. I don't do nicotine at all, so for me it's easy. I don't like nicotine, and I like a very VG heavy juice. So I did 20% of this stuff, 40 milliliters, dumped this stuff into this bottle until it was full to the top, closed it, made sure that it was closed, and chug. Beautiful thing about most naturally extracted tobaccos is that if you go through the steeping process correctly, if you do this in your closet or whatever, if you do a cold maceration process, the concentrate itself, it's ready to go. I mean, it's just good. It's solid and ready to go. You don't have to steep the final juice. You never really steep juice. The steeping process that people talk about when they mix their own juices is more of just a physical combination process. It's just a mixture process. All the little bits and bobs and stuff that are in the juice end up just kind of mixing together and making a more consolidated, if you will, final product. I have found that you don't really need to do that with naturally extracted tobaccos because the concentrate that is in this is as good as it's going to get. It tastes as good as it's going to get just because the process has been done. As long as you steep it, and you are properly steeping it in your closet, as long as you steep it long enough. That's why I say do 6 to 8 weeks. Me personally, this particular batch that I did, I steeped it for barely 5 weeks. I started testing it at about the 3-week process. And about 10 days before I finally cut the process out, it just reached a certain darkness and stopped. It didn't get any darker, and I kept taking little 1-2 milliliter samples out of it and filtering it and making a juice out of it. And I didn't notice it getting any stronger over the course of 10 days. At that point, I called it good and said, "All right, it's done." I don't know why this particular batch steeped that quickly. It may have something to do with the particular cigar that I chose. Maybe it was the Maduro wrapper on there. Whatever the case is, it ended up being a very dark, kind of a skunky smelling concentrate. I mean, it really does smell kind of skunky. But I sent some of this over to Scott Bonner. I Get You 69. He went ahead and mixed up a batch of this stuff and vaped on it. And he said the same thing. He said the concentrate just smelled horrible, but the final product vaped really, really nice. Not as strong as I would have thought it would be. Again, this is the CAO Flathead Carb V660, one of the best rated cigars from last year by Cigar Aficionado. And it's really, really good vape. I did a dry pull on the cigar. I didn't light it up because I don't smoke anymore. I did a dry pull on the cigar before I mixed up the liquid or the concentrate with it, and it was really nice. It tasted really nice with a dry pull, and I could tell that I was going to produce a nice liquid. Anyway, I put 40 milliliters in there. I guess it was about up to that far, maybe about there, and then I just filled the rest of it to the top with the vegetable glycerin, shake and vape, and there you go. This is the final product in my atomizer. This is my Pico RTA with my typical stainless steel 316 26 gauge. I forget how many wraps I've got on there. It comes out to 0.9 ohms, and it just vapes solid. 35 watts, standard power mode. Man, that's good. Kind of a earthy, maybe a little earthier than the last batch that I put together that I sent to Scott. And surprisingly enough, being as it's a full-bodied cigar, it's a little bit milder. I don't know if different aspects of the leaf are leaching into the propylene glycol a little bit differently, but whatever the case, it's really pleasant. My next batch of this, I might actually mix a little stronger, or I might just do the math and calculate out how much more concentrate I need to put this in, and I might try 25% with this just to see if it gives that little extra punch for a full-bodied, full-flavored cigar. And it tastes and vapes nothing like it smells as a concentrate, which is good. I mean, even as a final product, it smells far different than the concentrate does. Don't know what the logistics behind that are. I really don't know what else to say. I just wanted to follow up with my previous video, show you the final juice after I've mixed it, after I've mixed it up, and go ahead and give you kind of a taste impression. Now, I am a predominantly tobacco vapor. I'll occasionally dabble in other flavor profiles, but it's almost always tobacco, and if I get a choice in the matter, I go naturally extracted. I mean, to that end, this is doing a really good job. You see the vapor is nice and thick, but that's more because I'm using 80% of this stuff. The flavor saturated into the VG very well. That's all the concentrate. The concentrate's doing all of the work on that. Something you gotta keep in mind is the base that you use is going to affect the flavor quite a bit. This probably tastes a little bit sweeter than if I were to do, say, a 50-50 blend. If I had put the 40 milliliters of the concentrate in there, and then topped it off with another 60 milliliters of just pure propylene glycol, and then top that off with 100 milliliters of VG, I would still get the same flavor density. I would get the same flavor ratio, but it would taste different because the propylene glycol itself actually impacts the flavor. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to play around with it unless you know particularly that I don't like propylene glycol. I'm not allergic to propylene glycol. I'm very, very slightly sensitive to it. It leaves an aftertaste in my mouth that most other people don't pick up. And my throat is overly sensitive to propylene glycol. A very heavy PG juice gives me, I mean, it's supposed to give a pretty powerful throat hit, but it gives me more powerful throat hit than most other folks, which is another reason that I typically don't use nicotine. I don't need it for throat hit. Even the 20% PG in this is giving me plenty of throat hit. Now, that being said, if you're looking for throat hit, you're going to have to do something along two lines. One, use more PG than I did. I don't recommend thinning this stuff any further down than, say, 50-50. Beyond that, it's going to be really, really punchy. It's going to be really potent stuff, even without nicotine. Or two, you're going to have to put some nicotine in it. I just prefer not to use nicotine if I don't need it. I'm no longer addicted to this stuff. I haven't vaped on it in quite some while. Now, that's not saying that I can't vape nicotine. If I find a juice that I'm interested in and it tastes good, I like it, and all that's available is 3 milligrams, I can pick that stuff up and vape it fine. I just got to be careful with it because I don't typically vape nicotine, and I'll nick myself out, even on 3 milligrams. 6 milligram juice, I'll nick myself out very quickly because my body is no longer used to it. I don't require it. I'm no longer addicted to it. So just keep that in mind. Really not sure what else to say. The flavor on this is really nice. It's an earthy, and I don't want to say a mild cigar. I would say it's a medium-bodied cigar at this point, but it's really well-rounded. And you can definitely tell this is a cigar. It doesn't taste like a pipe tobacco. It doesn't taste like an analog cigarette tobacco. It doesn't taste like a whole leaf. This definitely has a cigar flavor to it, which makes sense. It came from a cigar. So play around with this. If you want to do this process that I did to make this stuff so that you can use it to make this stuff, go to a tobacconist. That's probably your best bet. In my previous video, I've had one person ask me, what if I tried this with cigarettes? You know, I know you said don't do this with Marlboros. Yeah, definitely don't do it with a pack of Marlboro Reds and try to make a juice out of that. It's going to taste like, you know, hot monkey ass. What goes into this is ultimately what comes out of it. So use a high quality tobacco. And I mentioned in the comments in there, and I'll go ahead and put it here vocally, that you got to be careful what type of tobacco. Please forgive the noise that's outside. They're doing house construction on the street over. I live in a new neighborhood, and apparently they're doing power sawing right now. So if you're picking that up in the camera, sorry. Anyway, what I mentioned in the comments there is processed tobacco. The more processed it is, cigarettes being about as processed as they can be, they are given more treatment. They are giving more lacings with chemicals and whatnot. Even roll your own tobacco is typically laced with something. Your best bet, if you're willing to do it, is to go get whole leaf tobacco. I mean, you literally no shit by the leaves. I mean, just a big gigantic sheet of tobacco, and it's typically folded up into like a little cube or something. You got to wet it, unfold it, and do all the stuff with it. The problem with that is you're not going to get a cigar taste. You're not going to get a pipe tobacco taste, because pipe tobaccos use multiple types of tobacco, which are treated and fermented in a particular method, and cigars do the same thing. Now, cigarette tobacco, including roll your own tobacco, is typically treated a particular way to make it taste like a cigarette. That's why cigarettes have a distinctive taste to them. And they do this by typically lacing them with chemicals or other products that contain chemicals. Cigars and pipe tobacco, generally the way those are manufactured are They pick the tobacco leaf, they put it either in a barn or shed or something, whatever, depending on the fermentation process that they use. However that tobacco is cured, it's just cured. Air cured, smoke cured, whatever, sun cured. However they do it, whatever the process is. The only two varying processes that I know of off the top, or three that I know of, are latakia, which is a smoke cured, sun dried, then smoke cured tobacco. Still pretty much all natural, but you're getting some stuff from the smoke. And then your two pressure fermented processes, Cavendish and Perique. They're both similar processes, but different enough to produce different tastes. Perique, basically, they fold the leaves up into little nubbins. They shove them in a barrel, and they get a big gigantic screw jack and press it down until air can't get in there anymore, and then it anaerobically ferments. That gives it a really, really potent, really strong, peppery taste. Very distinct to Perique. Cavendish is pressure fermented under blocks, but typically Cavendish is also cased beforehand. They take the tobacco leaves, they case it in some flavorings, cherry, vanilla, whatever, and then they allow the fermentation process to happen under blocks, but not necessarily under a screw jack or something like that. Similar process. That's about as unnatural as any pipe tobacco gets. Cigars, they're typically just air cured, sun cured, whatever cured, rolled up into the cigar that you smoke, and that's it. That's why I recommend those products. The work is done for you. The very subtle degrees of flavored between the 4 different types of tobacco that a cigar uses are in that cigar in the right ratio. Same thing with the Cavendish, same thing with the Perique. I don't recommend vaping Perique straight, by the way. That's some strong stuff. But whatever your choice of pipe tobacco is, it's all in there already and pre-mixed. So your ratio is going to be proper. And at the end of the day, the ratio in your juice is also going to be proper. In a cigarette, I was also asked about, well, what about those bad chemicals? You said that the nicotine and the tar aren't leached out into your concentrate. That's true. Nicotine and tar are not PG or VG soluble. If they are, it's negligibly soluble. This, at the end of the day, has such trace amounts of nicotine and tar that they're practically not measurable. We measure nicotine in the industry in milligrams per milliliter. The concentrate here is less than 1/2 of 1 milligram per milliliter, and this is the concentrate. If I mix this at a 20% ratio, I'm getting about 0.1 milligrams per milliliter nicotine in the final product. Maximum. That's the max I'm going to get out of that. The stuff just isn't soluble in propylene glycol. Similarly, neither is tar. The stuff just stays in the leaves because it's got nowhere else to go. If you do a heat maceration process, typically that involves some use of alcohol. Tar and nicotine are both incredibly soluble in alcohol, ethanol, the drinking alcohol that we use. That's why I don't recommend doing the heat maceration process, because it typically requires a little bit of ethanol, and I don't recommend doing a straight up ethanol extraction process, because then you're going to get a shit ton of nicotine in it and a little bit of tar. Now, backtracking a little bit as to why I don't recommend using cigarettes. The other chemicals that they add into this, many of those are soluble perfectly in water, vegetable glycerin, propylene glycol. So some of these additives, you're going to get them. You're not even going to notice them. I really don't recommend it. Even an organic cigarette, I know what was mentioned in the comments was American Spirit. Organic requires only a growing process. It doesn't require a manufacturing process, casing process, anything to that effect. For them to label the product organic, it depends on what kind of pesticides are used on the tobacco. Typically, those are the exact same pesticides that are used in commercial grade tobacco, simply because only a few pesticides work on tobacco. Tobacco itself is an incredibly good pesticide because of the high nicotine content. So that's something to keep in mind. Organic does not necessarily mean it doesn't contain all the other shit that cigarettes have. It's a label to get people to buy stuff, and there is some truth to it. The growing, feeding, fertilizing, and pest control processes do have certain guidelines they have to follow, but it is not the end-all be-all. It is not a super safe cigarette. What was mentioned specifically as a question was the American Spirit Perique cigarettes. American Spirit is a brand of cigarettes, if anyone doesn't know, that are organic in nature. And, you know, when I was a smoker, I tried them, and they were pretty good. The Perique cigarettes contain a small percentage, about 5%, I think, of Perique tobacco, and it gives it a distinctive flavor. I think you would get a decent tasting juice out of it, but it would still have the extra chemical-laden stuff that the cigarette tobacco side of it has. I personally think you're better off, if you're interested in Perique, getting a whole leaf burley, Golden Virginia, something like that, grinding it up, and then buying a bag of Perique. You can go to any good tobacconist and get the stuff, and it's a little more expensive than other tobaccos, but it's not prohibitively expensive because you're not going to use a lot of it. Again, Perique is incredibly strong stuff. Mix it up at about a 5 to 10% ratio, pop it in there, and see how you like the juice. You know, 5 to 10% ratio Perique to the other tobacco, then do your concentrate, you know, like I showed you in the previous video. And I think that'll give you a nice Perique flavor. You want more kick? Go up to about 20%, and that's going to be some strong-ass tobacco. So, yeah. I would never use cigarette tobacco to answer that question, just because you don't know what you're vaping on. Perique, it's nothing but pressure fermented tobacco. Most other pipe tobaccos, you're going to get some sort of sun-cured, air-cured, flue-cured, whatever cured tobacco. It's been hung up somewhere and allowed to dry. Cigar tobacco, same thing. It's just they choose tobaccos that are grown in different regions with different flavors. Flavor characteristics, and they put the stuff together in different ratios, and then they roll it in a tube. That's all they do. Cigarettes, I don't know that I would go through all of that. I just don't think it's safe. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling on that because this video is getting long enough. This stuff actually turned out very well. I'm very surprised, and I can't wait to move on to my next thing. I haven't ordered this stuff yet, but I'm working on a Mapacho blend. Anyone that doesn't know what Mapacho is, it is a blend of Nicotiana rustica. It's the strongest tobacco on earth. While I was in the Navy, I had the opportunity to visit Peru, and I still smoked at the time. You know, went around the local shops, and I remember seeing these Mapacho cigars. And I did a little bit of research on it before I decided to smoke one, and found out that the Nicotiana rustica is a cousin, brother, maybe possibly a parent plant to Nicotiana tabacum. That is the common tobacco plant. And what I remember about this is two things. One, the nicotine content of that thing laid me on my ass really fast. Typical Nicotiana tabacum, maximum of about 3% nicotine content, typically more around about 2%. Nicotiana rustica has an average of 9% nicotine, all the way up to as much as 20%. And in South America, Peru especially, this is where the stuff grows really well. Jungle-grown rustica typically has about 12 to 15% nicotine content. And I bought a couple of these cigars. One was just straight up Mapacho, and one was called Tabaco de Moy, which is a breed of Mapacho that is treated differently, cured a little bit differently. Both of these cigars laid me on my ass really quick. I mean, just a couple of pulls on them, and my head was swimming. I was stoned off of the nicotine. Also, what I remember before getting stoned and loopy is that they had a really nice mellow flavor. So I'm going to use my cold extraction process. I'm going to get some Nicotiana tabacum and some Tabaco de Moy. I'm going to mix these in a particular ratio that I'm going to come up with on my own, and I might sprinkle a couple other exotic tobaccos in there because, you know, there are some Indian tobaccos, there are some tobaccos in different regions of the world. I'm going to get some Thuc Lao, which is a breed of Nicotiana rustica that grows in Vietnam. I'm going to mix these up, and I'm going to make a really strong exotic tobacco juice, and we'll see how that works out. That's going to be months down the road, though, so whenever I get to doing that, I'll let you know. And I'm going to try something different with the the extraction process. I'm going to try to more finely grind the tobacco and see what happens. Anyway, I'll go ahead and stop this. This video is almost 25 minutes. So with that, remember, today is August 3rd. 5 days. 5 more days. until the deeming regulations kick into effect that the FDA have instilled on us here in the United States. We don't have time to have these stopped in the next 5 days. However, the fight is nowhere near over, and like I said before, we've got a good fighting chance. Contact your representatives. Email them. Bug the ever-living crap out of them. CASA, SAFADA, Not Blowing Smoke, AMSA, Right to Be Smoke Free, August8th.org. Go to these websites. Pledge support. If you can't afford a penny, that's fine. Pledge your support. Give a testimonial. Spend your time doing something. And contact your representatives. Tell them to support H.R. 2058 and the Cole Bishop Amendment. All that stuff's still active right now. And if we don't support advocacy on our end, they're not going to support it on theirs. They need to see that. And you need to do it. I've done my part. You need to do yours as well if you're at all passionate about vaping. So, soapbox gone. I'll go ahead and stop talking about that. Yeah. Do your own tobacco. Turns out pretty well. So with that, I'll go ahead and get off of this and leave you. So thanks for watching. If you found this video entertaining and or informative, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you again. Vape on. Yep, turn it on first. Man, that's good stuff.